Okay, our Rancho Public Schools Board special work session for August 19th is now called to order. JC, can you take a roll call for us?
President Galbraith.
Present.
Vice President Morgan. Secretary Tyler.
Present.
Board Member Tripp.
Present.
Board Member Miller. We have a quorum.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone out. You might see me texting some board members real quick here in a minute just to see where everyone's at. Thank you though for coming out. It's kind of a big deal of the things that we're going to be talking about today. And so I'm just grateful for everyone who did come up and came up from school and all of those things. But we'll go ahead and start with approving our prioritized agenda and proposed time allocations.
Madam President, this is Board Member Tyler. I'll make a motion to approve the prioritized agenda for proposed time allocation.
Board Member Tripp will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Great. All right, so am I handing right off to Patrick, or do you want me to go this way first?
I can turn it to Mike when I say a few things. And
Okay. Okay, so we'll
Yeah.
start.
Madam President, Dr. Cleveland and members of the board. So just a quick intro. So this evening, as you are aware, we're going to be going over the future plans of Independence High School. So Patrick will lead off. He's going to go over 3 different options. And of course, those 3 different options have 3 different cost elements with those. When Patrick is completed, maybe a good time to maybe go through some questions. And then after that, I will then proceed to review our bonding capacity and what the funds that are coming in. And because of the nature of construction being so expensive, so we're really going to be limited on the number of projects we're going to be able to get completed from bond money. But I'll get into more specifics later. So with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick to go over some of the elements of the project.
Okay, thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. So what you have in front of you is diagrams, and I want to make sure that it's understood that these are programmatic diagrams. They're not floor plans. So these are really about adjacencies, programmatic elements, making sure that we have all of these programmatic elements in the building, where different elements are located. Again, adjacency is what's close to what, and this has all been, we've worked very closely with Jessica and Andrea at Independence High School to look at some of the needs. And as we've been going through the programmatic phase into schematic design, we've kind of narrowed down what these needs are, and it's come with a square footage increase from what we initially had anticipated, which again will come at a cost increase, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But what I'd like to do is get into each of these diagrams. We have 3 options for you, and all have different budget implications. So the first option, if you go into the first page, is what we're calling option A, and this option really is the I don't want to say bare minimum, but the minimum that we will accept that will meet the needs of the school, both at the student level, but also at the support level. So making sure we have all the spaces that we need, the sizes that we need to service the students. So one of the big things that came out from our early programmatic study was a cafeteria. So making sure that we have a place for them to eat that's sizable. So right now, one of the biggest things you'll see here is we have a 2,500 square foot cafeteria that will service about half the students. We worked with the school to be able to ensure that we can have 2 lunches to be able to accommodate that. And what you see here are all the classrooms that will meet the needs of, again, serving the additional amount of students, but also being able to have enough space for all the students. We don't want them crammed into tight classrooms. So this right here is kind of your base plan. There is an interior courtyard that is meant to be outdoor recreation, outdoor seating, and then throughout you'll see that there's some common areas. But the majority of it is classrooms, support spaces, and then the administration. It does have a full-size kitchen, also to service the cafeteria. So this option, again, this is the bare minimum of what we will accept, and this is about 29,000 square feet. And this specific diagram, what we've estimated is about $32 million total project cost, which is a little bit up from what we had initially
It's
thought.
probably already gone up since last time you looked at it.
You can't blink because it keeps going up. And then what you have on the right side is a proposed site plan. Now again, this is really diagrammatic. What we're doing at this point is just exploring ways to enter the site, utilize existing entrances, how the site circulation might work, how bus pickup drop-off might work, and then also areas where there's potential for future buildings, future additions, what the parking requirements are. And as we go through, you'll notice that these slightly change as the building grows. So as we move up, it's not a one-for-one where we just add square footage. It kind of exponentially grows. The more space you have, the more restroom requirements you might have, the more parking spaces you might require. So again, this is what we're calling the base plan. This is option A at 32 million. And if you have any questions, I don't know if you want to, as we go through, or do you want me to go through all of them?
Yeah, go through it.
Okay. Okay. So the next page we have option B, which comes in at about just under 32,000 square feet, 31,369 gross square feet. And this really is very similar to option A, but what we've added is an assembly space. One of the things that have come out of our meetings with the school are just having a large space for all of the students to meet. The idea of this assembly space is it's located near the cafeteria, so the assembly space itself doesn't have to be large enough to hold all the students, but can be combined with the cafeteria, maybe a movable wall, to create a larger space that can then accommodate assembly space. The rest of the school stays exactly as option A. And then again, some of the other implications might be just some increased parking, not much, and potentially some fixture counts, but again, that one isn't a huge jump, and so that one comes in at 34 million total project cost. And then we have option C, which is kind of the pie in the sky. If we have all the funds, this is what we would like to have. And really the big difference here is instead of having assembly space, we have an auxiliary gym at about 3,000 square feet, and we also have an auditorium. And this could help with larger classes for specific types of program, as well as physical education, having that indoor. So those are the two really the bigger ones. But I will say this one does require an increase because of the larger assembly spaces. It does come with larger restrooms, more fixtures, larger circulation areas, and then if you look at the parking, that also increases because it is a larger building. The square footage of this one jumps up to 37,219 square feet. With a total project cost of 40 million. And then if you look at the very last page, and this is if you want to look at some of the details, is really just a programmatic matrix to show the spaces and kind of where those square footages come from in a matrix form, in a table form, with the project's cost at the bottom. So you're seeing option A really gives us everything we need for the school to function, for us to service the desired amount of students. And then B gives us a little bit more, and C gives us everything that we would like to have, but may not have the funding for. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
If I may, let me add one very important element. Patrick touched on this, but I really want to highlight it. So let's talk about construction of your home. So if you're building your home and you say, I want to put an addition on and I want to add a living room, you're just going to add a living room. And the additional cost will only include that living room. But because we're talking commercial space here, what Patrick was saying, when we go from Plan A And we actually had a plan before Plan A. But when you increase the square footage, there's many other things that you have to increase. Patrick said restroom. So originally, we were looking at about 350 students. So it was about 450.
It's designed for that.
It's just not that we would have that many, but it's designed, and one of the elements was because it's a special program that we wanted to have more of an open, inviting area rather than have that density that we have at our comprehensives now. So, I'll just say, these students will have a little bit more elbow room. Unfortunately, with that comes that additional cost, because now what you're having to do, because of the different codes, is not only do you increase certain spaces, but you also have to increase the restrooms, for example. You have to increase the parking area. So you don't just add one little thing and that's the additional cost. No, it's the whole thing. So we have to be really cautious when we say, well, let's just add this or let's just add that. So that was one element of the change from years ago when we first started to plan for that. And then the second thing is, and after questions, I will get more into the cost factor. As you know, the cost of construction has skyrocketed. And so we'll get into that in a little bit. So anyway, with that, we'll move to questions.
Okay, Dr. Cleveland, do you want to add anything as we go?
Why don't we let the board ask the questions? I said this, the biggest challenge is looking at the financing, how they manage. Everything has gone up so much. So I think that's, I don't know, Mike, if you want to go through that even now, like get a better picture of the line.
It's, yeah, your prerogative.
I mean, it's whatever you want to do.
Do we want to start with some initial questions, or do you guys want to look at finances? All right, we can do, well, and I'm kind of curious, so we have Andrea and Jessica here. Do you guys have any questions? Just, you've probably met with them already, but do you guys, yeah, so you guys are feeling pretty good, okay. Okay, so, board questions, Gary?
Was the bond proposal for 26 million or for 32 million with the PSFA share?
Yeah, for 26 million.
And there's no PSF share for,
So this 32 million.
that's looking at option A. Maybe
Oh,
it
that's
might be
just
worth
looking at
maybe
the
going
options.
over that.
That's fine.
That way, because they kind of go hand in hand. So this is what we're proposing from a programmatic standpoint, what those cost implications are. The next level is what the financial impact is.
So, yeah, why don't we do that, because we'll probably answer some questions when we go over the financing. So I think to Gary's point, two things. One, the original project cost, we estimated at 26 million. And unfortunately, the PSFA, they will not subsidize this program. So it's all on our own. So if you look at the bond sheet, so what you'll see here is, we use the word priority. Probably shouldn't use that word instead of, we should probably have used the word how we plan on actually drawing the bonds. Because you'll see priority 2, it actually says new Independence High School. It's really the higher priority, but the reason why it's in 2, it has to do with financing. Because the project is well underway, but we're not going to actually finance it until next year. But that's, so don't.
Like phase 1, phase 2 kind of funding.
Well, it's more about, priority is more about the financing priority. How we plan on financing these projects as we go over the
You
years.
guys know that this is our top priority, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and it really comes down to right now, we wouldn't need the money to build it because it's not ready to build. So that would happen in year 2, which is why it was pushed to. So he's right. Yeah, priority wasn't really what the intent was. It's more about which year the issuance.
Makes sense.
So unfortunately, knowing that the board's, the 2 high priorities were Independence High School and the preschool, those are at the top, and we want to finance those. But unfortunately, there were some projects that we're not going to be able to pay for out of bond money. And so let me go through those, and then we'll kind of demonstrate what our thinking is, and then you can give us direction. But when you look at the left side of the spreadsheet, you will see the projects, you'll see the schools, you'll see the total project cost, the PSFA share, and Rio Rancho Public School share. Now, when we did the original estimates, and we knew this was going to change, but we didn't know in what direction. We estimated that the PSFA share, it was going to be more of a 50-50 split. And so unfortunately, now it is us 52, them 48. So we lost ground there. The same thing on the preschool, we lost a couple of points. We lost 3 points on the preschool. And the reason why that is, every year they reevaluate. It's this crazy formula that they do, and I don't think it provides equity to anybody. But these things change every year. And so that was our estimate. And unfortunately, even though we were close, a few percentage points, we were talking $80 million, adds up quickly. And so that's what happened to us. It was not in our favor. Yeah, we already said
we anticipated it being the 52-48 split based on our conversations with PSFA at the time. And they've gone up to closer to a 70-30 split, which was pretty significant. And that's what really the next column is highlighting, is what just that alone, what that has done to the list.
So was Cyber Academy part of the original list in the bonds?
It was a project, but it didn't fall within the 80 million. And that project was taken off the bond list because what happened is the waiting list essentially evaporated. So at one time we had a waiting list for people to get into cyber. We were going to expand the building. That was the purpose of expanding the building largely, not the only purpose. But what happened is that waiting list basically went to zero. So there was really no need for that reason, to increase cyber. And we were simply limited on the amount of money that we could bond. And so when you're looking at the projects, I'm sorry, you're right, the 37-63 split. So when you're looking at the projects, you'll see highlighted in yellow the changes that we made. And so knowing that, Rio Rancho High School is a high priority, and a lot has to do with the simple aging of the building. And secondly, we are likely to get a lot of funding from PSFA. So that project is essentially, we recommend that we still continue to fund that project. The same thing with Cleveland High School. They are not losing student enrollment. If anything, it's going the other way incrementally. The addition or new pre-K, we have that project in there at $2 million. This is our cost, by the way. And then some work at Lincoln Middle School for roof replacement and for additional classroom. We have $600,000 and then $1.7 million. Going down the list, you can see that we changed Independence High School from 26 million to 32 million. That's assuming, we had to make some assumption here. One is that you're going to choose option A, but that's your choice. If you choose the other options, we will simply increase that number and decrease the other numbers in order to balance. And then we have some roof replacements that we simply need to do. Colinas, Maggie, and the special ed building renovation at 3.5 million, 2.5 million, and 4 million respectively. And then we go down to do some structural improvements and electrical upgrade at Eagle Ridge for a total price of $700,000, which brings us to the 80 million. Boy, 80 million adds up pretty quick when you're looking at these. And so in the other columns, what we're looking at is not funding these through bond money. We're going to try to take care of some of these things. I don't know if we can do all of them through SB9 and our matching SB9 funds. So that's kind of the financing option because of Independence High School, the additional cost factor.
It's important to note that as we've been going through, programmatic exercises and then getting into schematic design, we've been keeping a close eye on the budget, close eye on construction costs, and I can tell you they have been increasing pretty rapidly. When we first started, they were around 700, and we've gone all the way up to about $980 a square foot. So that's kind of what we've had to deal with, throughout this process, and why we're coming to you to let you know, this is where we're at, and we still want to make sure that we're providing a school that meets all the needs, but we are up against some financial constraints with this.
And to kind of put things in perspective, and Patrick and I were talking about this the other day, and I remember when we were building Joe Harris Elementary, and we were building that building under COVID, and I know at that time that school board was thinking, well, maybe we shouldn't do this. And I'm glad we decided to forge ahead, because the cost of that building, I think, was $262?
About $280.
About
$280 per square foot.
Yeah. So now we're in the $900, range. What? Really less than 4 years later.
And this is it, and it's not just it's, as you guys know, it is statewide. We've been in close contact with our neighbor Albuquerque Public Schools to see some of the things that they're going through, and they bid out a few schools recently, and they're averaging, and these are very basic schools in the mid 800s. So it's going up fast.
Okay. So are you guys done with the finance part?
I think so.
Okay. So Gary, with that, we'll go back to your question. I don't know if you want to ask more questions now.
Well, I was still concerned about Cyber Academy because I thought it was on the bond election. I had it on my list before the special education building. And I know that's still a project. I guess another question from this page is, what is DP again?
Desert Pathways.
Desert Pathways. Okay. And so just another thought I had, and it goes way back to when we started talking about the bonds, is I don't feel like an alternative school should be that big of 450 students. But that's just my opinion. I think it needs to be a small school, 300 or less.
So just to clarify, it's designed for that much because of the way the program works, but the goal would to be a total of 350 students is the target for the enrollment.
We kind of talked about that, Gary, when he brought this. So they may have rooms for 28, but we would never put 28 kids in a classroom at Independence. So it may be built for 450, but the reality of how many kids we would actually have in the building would be different.
And one of the big constraints we run into specifically with Independence has to do with their schedule, and I can let Jessica talk about that, but that's one of the constraints is how the school runs because of transportation. It would be easy to say, we have less classrooms and you have prep periods, things like that, but because of the way the schedule works, everything has to be a teacher per classroom. And that's why it technically needs to be designed to house all of the teachers. And I don't know, Jessica, if you want to touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, because we discussed maybe if it were smaller, that the teachers could share the classrooms. That's something like a college situation. Maybe they come in there and they teach the class. Unfortunately, all of our teachers are on deck, if you will, at the same time, because we only get them for so many hours a day because of the constrictions of the transportation. So in order to get those 5 classes in, everybody needs to be teaching at the same time. Therefore cannot share classrooms, because that was one of the first ideas, but then the transportation prevents that. I don't know if that's.
So
And what she means by transportation, so the students will go to, typically they'll go to Cleveland or
whichever home high school. they
whichever
go to.
home high school, and then from there, they get transported to Independence High School. And so there's additional travel time, so that compresses the learning time.
And then they pick them up first, get them to their schools, and then they get off the shuttle bus and get them to their neighborhood.
So everyone's prep is at the end of the day, once the kids have left. So they teach their 5 and then they have their prep.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean
Buses
for
ready
teachers to share
anything.
classes.
I mean, we prefer that they not be
That's the
shuttle.
thing, Rob.
It's not a good situation for anybody. But it's what we have to do based on the number of buses. It's not a good situation at all.
Yeah, I don't mean for the teachers to share. I might have asked the question wrong.
No, I think they were just saying like,
Yeah.
it can't be smaller because they need that many classrooms to teach that many kids.
I think I do it.
But to
My
your-
apologies.
No,
Yeah.
no, I understand the question. To your point on the question, like Patrick said, it's designed, but functionally it would not house that many. It's only because of the special type of program that the request was that it's a little bit more roomy. I don't know if I know that correctly.
So the classroom amount is the same, so the amount of classrooms that we currently have in our existing building are the same amount of classrooms that we'll have in the new building. But right now, we don't have any extras, we don't have any space, we don't have any simple basic things. We have a small amount of bathrooms, and it just goes on.
And we still have students on waiting lists every year. Maybe not most of, but we still have students we turn away every year that would like to go to Independence. And we just simply can't fit them in the building. We've got restrictions for fire marshal. And so that's gonna have to be dealt with. And that's not something we deal with if we feel like it, something we're gonna have to deal with. So, I think one of the, I mean, it is frustrating to see the costs go up. I think the other, and I think Mike's alluded to it, is we'd like to get a total building built, just because we see later on the challenges when you don't do that. That being said, there are some things that could be ad alternates, so could be some things that could be phased, particularly in the last option. You could phase some of those things, like an auditorium or auxiliary gym or some of those things could be in a phase 2 if the board wanted to do it. But I think the key that they're very strong in is that we need to get the basic building constructed, not knowing what the future might be. But if you look at that last option, for example, the auxiliary gym, the auditorium, but those things could be phased later. They're on the extremities of the plan. And I asked Patrick and Mike, could we step some of those in, if, and then build later so that the infrastructure would actually be there for the future, if that's what you wanted to do. But the reality is, as Mike's explained, we don't have 40 million. We cut back on projects already. But you could probably phase it. You might be able to phase the auditorium, the auxiliary gym, maybe even the weight room. And I know they very much want that, but that would be a phase 2. And if you look at that, that direction, then you have to think about, we've got a lot of other things we have needs for too. You mentioned Cyber Academy. So one of the differences with Cyber, I think, is that they're losing enrollment and Independence is gaining enrollment. So in terms of what students are asking for their needs, right now the higher priority is Independence, and then more students wanting access to the programs there than we do at Cyber. So, but that's another area, they were hopeful for a building, and the cost of everything has gone up. B is also, I kind of like B. I liked it because I like, and also C provides that larger space for the students to meet. And there isn't any large space in A for students to bring in any large number at any one given time. But again, I think that option A provides a good foundation and better than what they have right now. But, you know, I mean, my personal feelings, I like B and C, and I'm wondering if you know, if there's some of these things and you think they would be good for the future, they might look at that in terms of the phase. But I'll tell you, here's the problems with phases. You never know what the future financial picture is going to be. You never know, you know, what other options might arise. And so, and it is more expensive to come back in phase two, unless you've done all the structural work to where you can add in at later time. So there are drawbacks to phasing, and I think you all are very familiar about what those drawbacks are in terms of part of it. But if you know, some of those things could be added later if they're really that, you know, that high a priority. Then a school would like to have some of those things. So it's a challenge we have every building we build. The needs exceed the money, and but in this one it's harder than most because of just the huge increase in the cost of supplies, materials, equipment, labor. It's all of it has gone up in the last 3 years. So the other is this building is much larger than what they have. And boardings know that it's not much larger than what they have. But you want to explain, Patrick? It's much more efficient building.
It is.
And so by building in those efficiencies, it's going to feel larger, just because it's better designed and you're not wasting space.
Yes, yeah. So one of the things we noticed right off the bat with the current facilities, there's a lot of wasted space. There's a lot of inefficient space. There's some of the reasons. That's part of some of the reasons we've got issues with the fire marshal. It's just kind of, you know, it wasn't intended for that when it was designed. They're doing the best they can to make it work, but at the end of the day, it's extremely inefficient. So the idea when we're looking at this is not to get too caught up in square footages, because really it is a way more efficient building. The circulation is more efficient. The spaces are designed with intent, and so really it's more of a quality versus a quantity. So they're getting a school versus, you know, right now was a warehouse at one point that they're, you know, teaching out of. And so that's something to keep in mind when we're looking at this, is it's the qualitative aspect of it.
Beth, do you have any questions?
Are some of the students going to go to tech school, tech high school when it's finished? How is that going to go?
I'm hoping, you know, I know there's a criteria to get in there, and we're certainly going to cheer them on and do whatever we can to support that, but I don't know, because we haven't.
But let me explain the challenge with that, and we are going to try to make an exception and work around however we can do it for independence. But the tech school is a full-day school. And so, because we're not half-day at the home campus at Cleveland or Rio Rancho, then it's a full-day school. Many of our students that come into independence are behind in their credits to start with. So some of the classes that they need are not going to be available there because of that. And so it'll be a challenge both in terms of transportation, how do we get those students who want to go there? That being said, we're going to try and make that work because we know some of these students would really benefit from it. But let's say they need an English 1 and they don't have it. Well, it's not going to be offered at CD, so there is no English 1 class there. So it's going to be different for our kids at Independence. But we're going to try really hard. We do not want to exclude them. And so if they have their own vehicle, that's a lot easier to work out because they could drive over for the classes that they want. If they don't have a vehicle, then we're looking at the possibility of transport in terms of some of our Suburbans or some other things that we might be able to let them go and take classes. But it's more of a challenge than for the 2 comprehensive, simply because they are behind in credits. Now, if they're not, then it's an easier solution. I'm sure you all have given a lot of thought to that. So I don't know if you want to share kind of what your thoughts are with it. Gotta be harder. The kids of the other two comprehensives, they will give up that comprehensive. They will go to CTE and that will be their home school all day. And you cannot do that the same way.
So ideally, I see it more as a partnership. Ideally, if we could set something up that we can bring these kids in, we can do a lot of that credit recovery and fill some of those gaps, and maybe partner with CTE opposed to them being full-time students there, and utilize the facility more for the electives and the vocational piece, and we'll take care of those foundational skills and the gaps and the remediation. I think that's, if you said it perfectly. I don't know that they're equipped or it was designed to do that for these students, but I do think, and correct me if I'm wrong, these are those students who are gonna thrive there. It's the hands-on, I mean, it's made for students like that, and I think it would also keep them really motivated not to quit, and it just give them a leg up. So if I had my brothers, I would say, let's partner, we'll do a side thing over here, and we just have to figure out the logistics of that.
I think what'll end up,
Probably transportation.
yeah, what will end up happening with CNM, we have 50% of the seats for the CTE side, and then 50% for other students. And so these students will be other students. So they'll be able to sign up for the classes on that side of it. And then we just have to figure out how to be flexible, which we will, for the kids to get their core classes.
But that's assuming, and it's a big assumption, that CNM doesn't fill them.
Correct.
And so, and they made it very clear, I think, that their students will take priority for their 50%. So, I think we can work it out. We're really very optimistic that we can. But, they've been very clear that their students will get the first priority on that 50% of the seats.
I guess my hope is that over the long term is that we have less students going into independence, and because there's this new option that it excites some of them and that they're able to keep those grades and get right into that building and have that hands-on experience that they need. So that's my hope, and I think that's something that we should watch with our numbers and see if it does affect.
Well, and we're really hopeful that we can go down to grade 10. Right now, we're taking the 11th and 12th graders, and so it's hard to get them out on time when they come in as a senior. But we're really hopeful we can go down to grade 10, and then they could go to their home high school or to CTE or get back on track and then get back into the comprehensives or the CTE high school.
That would be great.
Yeah.
I understand some of these students come in with 5 credits.
As a senior.
So you have been to make up all of these other courses in a really short period of time. And so that's going to be a challenge too. And so long term, and some of these kids come in from outside our district with those very few credits. So that's the challenge. Those kids are so far behind. And we've talked about it before, but you're aware, unless we could get a change at the state level with our state plan, then these students that walk in with 5 credits have to graduate within the 4-year time, or it's counted against the school. Yeah. And so it makes that really hard to get to that, to get to that cutoff of what's the 60, what's the number, 67% graduation rate, or we face all kinds of penalties such as the removal of the board of superintendent. So what we've got,
Go out.
They have a couple of others, but those would involve families and angry parents and all that. So I would suspect that those are the low-hanging fruit, and we're it. So it's the other option, though, all would not necessarily be lost. We would go back and probably look at diverting back to a program, and that would not be as good a situation. They're proud of their school, and they have their mascot, and they have their student body, and they will be forced back into the comprehensives. They can attend there, but they can't. The school is Independence High School Philway. So it's a very frustrating thing, particularly when we have found out that other states have a 5 and 6 year graduation rate for schools that pick up students that are behind and they don't penalize them. What I suspect happened is that we submitted our state plan that way, instead of submitting it the way Ohio did or some other states did. I think it probably comes from how we submitted our plan to the federal government. I don't know that. I don't know that, but I don't understand why they would say to New Mexico 4-year graduation rate, but Ohio it's 5 or 6. So I would just assume that we need to resubmit state plan that would allow us to have a more reasonable 5 or 6 year graduation rate. And we have kids that do that,
Our actual 5 and 6 year graduation rate is actually very impressive.
Happy's done a great job.
Yes.
Getting us the data on that.
Like, oh, this is so great. It's just 6 years.
Is there motivation to change the state plan?
She's our motivation to change the state plan.
We're pushing, all the superintendents are pushing, every, except, well, I shouldn't say that. All of the districts are pushing if they have an alternative school. And it's interesting how everything is shaped in our own perceptions. A lot of the districts that do not have alternative schools are opposed to it. And I'm sure you can figure out why. They're opposed to it because they have the whole gamut of students within their high schools and their graduation rate reflects it. And so they don't like the fact that districts who have alternative schools, and it helps their comprehensive graduation rate, they think that's not fair. So there is not a unanimous feeling at the state level at all, but you do have the larger districts, so Albuquerque, Las Cruces, Santa Fe, Carlsbad, Hobbs, those are medium and are larger districts, and all support of getting the state plan changed. And the secretary has to agree with it. And I don't know where he's going on that. His first response was no. And he said that's not what the governor wanted. And I don't know that the governor understood really the consequences of it. So there's been another push to go back and try to re-explain that. And if not, you're really penalizing the people who are taking on the most vulnerable kids in our state, hurting them. Why would you do that? And when the state set a team down, the only feedback I got, I don't know what you all got, you got more, you and Renee and all that, but the only feedback I heard was it was great. They were pleased with the program and thought it was doing an outstanding job. So that's kind of the irony of how sometimes good intentions get distorted in the political process. But if not, we have plan B. Before they close it, we'll change it into a program and do and abolish the high school itself. I hope we never have to do that. You've attended the graduation graduation ceremonies. You see how meaningful it is to the kids and the families. It's one of the most, I think, emotional graduations. And we just have got to help the state understand the thinking behind what they're doing. This does not make sense.
Right, Jessica. So a couple questions. One, what percentage of the students currently at Independence are there specifically for credit recovery? It's more than like
All of them.
all of them,
Oh,
or?
it's not a choice school, so it's a school that.
Because that was my impression, that was the purpose, is credit recovery. But then some of the comments today, it's kind of seemed like, well, most of them or the majority of them, but that is the purpose of them attending.
Right,
correct?
the only exception would be our students who come to our grads program who may be on track to graduate but choose to come to Independence and grads is for our mothers or them, expecting mothers. And again, it's a choice. And so those are some of the few exceptions when they come to us on track to graduate, have all their academic, in order, but they're there for the other benefits. But the majority of all the students are referred from the comprehensive schools because they are behind in credits.
Okay, and then a question maybe for you, Renee. What is our current enrollment at Cleveland and Rancho this year?
They're both around 2650-ish.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still, like, going back to kind of Gary's initial question about, the size of it, I think that that's still a reasonable percentage for an alternative school compared to our comprehensive. And then my final question is, or I guess more of a comment or an ask for you guys is, I would like for you two to kind of walk through the different floor plans and talk about like the pros and cons that you see for option A, B, and C.
Sure. So, and we've gone through these with Patrick, and I appreciate he brought in from day one a floor plan, and we said this isn't gonna work, and he went back, and I appreciate that. So I think floor plan A, I think this is certainly something, it's something we have now. The space is more intentional, so I would say that, but I think it's everything we have now, and we can certainly get along just fine with this. This would meet all, you know, the needs in terms of access to the, you know, the teachers, and I like the fact that there's some walls. I'm just gonna be honest, there's a lot going on in there. The downfall for this, for A for me, is we bring in a lot of the community. We have guest speakers probably every other week that come in, and anything from military to, we have one of our most popular ones was when the nail tech lady came in. I think every girl in the school attended that, and some boys. But we don't have the space to hold those. So when we have guest speakers, we have to pick it. It's limited to the amount of students who can go. So that's the downfall here. Although we could use the auditorium again, we're still limited. The other thing that it's limited here is, you know, these students, they need to get around and move. They need that physical space. And right now, like, we put a basketball hoop in the parking lot and make sure there's no cars around. So they're going there, or they'll walk to the park. So it would be really nice if there was a place for them to physically play some, you know, play some games. But it would meet all of our needs.
We just recently, we kind of created a common area, like an assembly area where we could hold meetings with the staff, because we don't even have enough room really for the staff meetings. So we kind of created a space because we inherited or got the space from the daycare. And we found that we call it the assembly area, and it has already served a number of purposes. And so if the cafeteria doubles as that, like, we have a cafeteria currently, but it's not really ideal because of the lunches. And if we have to move to 2 lunches, then that's going to take up more space, which limits the amount. And so I think that is a big thing that's listed in A, is that assembly area.
And we to be, and it does include that assembly area. So it's everything we need plus that space where we can gather. And it does have the weight room, so we do have, they can get out there and have some physical activity. And correct me if I'm wrong, this patio has the basketball, and so they can go
That's the
outside.
idea. Obviously, it's very diagrammatic, but yeah, the idea is that it could be outdoor recreation as well as outdoor seating, common area.
And then C would be that would be more than that would be kind of the dream thing. I imagine we can get them together and play some volleyball or do some team building type stuff in there, which we don't have the space to do right now. And I just think that would be a lot of fun. And it's so, I will say the foundation of what we do there is that relationship building, and I think it's what makes it really special. We had a student that came to us first day of school. Well, we're a week in, and they just came to us. I don't forget what school. And he walks in, he had a question, and he said, "Hi, Marquise," and he said, "You remember my name?" And that meant a lot to him. And I said, "Yeah, we remember all of your names." And so, I think that's what's really special, is those relationships and the team building. And I just feel like a gym would give us those opportunities to have those things in career fair and those kind of things that we bring in. Of course, the auditorium for those guest speakers, and just gathering space is really important for us. So A would certainly work. It would meet our needs. The others just allow for that gathering space. So I think that's the only difference, correct?
In all 3, and I really like the design of all 3 of the options. I really like the outdoor commons area that's in the middle of the building and protected. And we really have a lot of issues across the street. People just come out, the kids are out in the parking lot, the cars go. I mean, there's just a continual, I don't know, kind of a mess out there with kids and parents and other, and this would give students a chance to be outside and have a little bit of room to move around, but it's protected by the buildings, so I really like the design of that. I thought that was really a real positive.
Because it's a PE class.
Yeah.
And right now, we don't have a gym and we don't have a protected area, so we have to cross the street to go to the grassy area, so it's not super safe. So this is lovely.
I'm glad that just asked that, because I was going to ask your opinions too on that. So I know we're not voting, because we're just in special meeting. You're looking for direction.
We're looking for direction, and we would really like to have direction tonight, but if you don't feel easy or good about the decision tonight, you need time to think about it, that's fine. But we really need to get this project moving in the right direction, or in the direction you all are wanting to go, so we can try to open up downtown.
So here's the options, right, Mike, and Patrick, jump in if I'm not saying it right. With A, we can build a building, we're cutting other programs to do it, but we can get the total building constructed as it's designed and on the sheet, cutting some other things. On option B, we would either have to cut more things, or we would have to defer either a phased project, or it's the same as for both B and C, we would have to defer some of the costs. So the next bond issue, maybe to complete it, because I don't think there's any other way, make up another $6 million. Right? I mean, we just don't see the possibility of that. But if you like that plan better, then we could look at a phase 1 and a phase 2, and that you were committing some additional bond monies for the future to finish it out. And some things could be done now, some stubbing and things, so when that time comes, would not be as expensive as if you were starting from scratch. But we never know, of course, what the future might hold. But it's either all for A, B and C would be either cutting or phasing, to make a commitment to the future to do that. And I don't know if you all have a feeling about that, one way or the other, but I just want to be sure everybody knows what the choices are.
And it is important to note that even without saying we are still looking at having to cut some projects and trying to fund them in another way, just given again the rising construction costs. So that's just something that I want to make sure that that's clear, that no matter what we choose, we're still having to some decisions regarding the bond projects.
Is there any, we've been trying to be as creative as we can, but are there more additional ways that we could be creative in raising $10 million for this project?
Well, yes.
So what would some of those
And
be?
so the big thing that I don't know what the odds are, but we've talked to APS, and they're trying to put a group together of like-minded school districts that are facing this very problem. And so we're hoping to approach the legislature this year and to say, this is what happened. We built a school a few years ago at $282 a square foot. Now we're looking at $900 a square foot, and we need these schools. We need help with funding. And the good news is that there's quite a bit of money in reserve. And I know that reserve is kind of more designated as a rainy day fund.
There's $1 billion in there or something.
We've got enough in the bank in Santa Fe for Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
Really, we've got so many resources there.
That's up to us. Because, right now they're, riding high on gas and oil, but they're also at the same time trying to kill the golden goose, so to speak. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy that's going on up there. And if gas and oil does go in the other direction, they are going to need some hefty reserves to maintain their operations. But the thing is I think there's gonna be a pretty strong coalition saying, look what happened. And some of what has happened is actually a direct result of decision making at the state level. I don't know if you want to bring that up. So anyway, we will try that. We will also, as we usually do, go to our delegation for additional funding. Some of these smaller projects we might be able to pick up with SB9 money. It's challenging, but that's kind of, I think, our approach.
I think along with that same question, at one point you had talked about another option that we've never used as far as like enacting a tax.
Yeah, so we are, so there's the possibility, it's not going to free up that much money, but it will help, and that is tech notes. And so we've talked to Eric about getting a little bit more serious with tech notes. And so we'll get more information and present that to the board. The amount, kind of the good thing about tech notes, you actually don't physically have to go out to the voters like a general obligation law. And so we could expedite the process, which would be good. And probably what we may want to do is maybe survey the community, ask the community, hey, are you willing to do this rather than go through the formal election? This way they have a voice, the voice is just in a different manner. So there are some other options. Tech notes is one. The other is simply to ask the voters for a property tax increase. Because now, as you heard, our finance folks said that our capacity has increased dramatically. The problem is, Intel, they're always playing that finance game, so you never know what they're going to do. But if they're going to try to leverage more tax breaks, in the future. But in any event, there is more capacity available. So we could actually go out to the voters, not in 4 years, but sooner than that, for an additional tax increase for additional bond money. That is probably not an ideal situation, but it's possible. And maybe tech notes may be the answer to actually complete
Bridging the
this.
gap.
Yeah.
Even with tech notes, do you think it would hurt some of our trust? So I think I see that as a good compromise in between there, but do you think it would hurt some of our trust for future bonding as we go out for bond if we do something like that?
Well, we could always have a special election. That's up to you all. We could have a special election, and it would take more time, but then and maybe these projects would be delayed a bit, but at least we would get them before the next cycle. Because when the next bonding cycle, we're going to need all that money for a new set of projects. But if we have to fall back to finish these up, of course we will.
I think you could also go look at it. We do know our capacities increase. You saw the presentation, it's pretty significant. So I agree with Mike, there's always projects that we never have enough money to do what we need to do. But with that increased capacity, you could face this. I mean, that is a possibility. On the other, and this is just personal, it has anything to do with the board and the people who disagree with it, and there have been districts who've done it otherwise. I would not want to increase people's taxes without asking them. And that's just my personal view. But I think it's just better to ask. I would like to think that people in this district, if we said this is going for technology, keep your I just had a meeting today with Terry Meyer, talk about that issue. If you want us to continue to maintain the same level of technology we have now, we're going to have some additional resources to do. And so it's, I would like to think that they would want their children to have the rich technology they've always had in the school district. But what we're looking at, and she shared some numbers, she's going to share with I've asked her to come back and share it with cabinet, share it with the board at some point. But where we really are in terms of replacing technology, it's getting really pretty scary of what we need to do in terms of, and we don't know where that money is gonna come from. But everything is technology. Our safety and security is technology. Our operational is technology. Our classrooms are technology. Everything we do in this district now is wrapped around technology, sometimes more than I would like it to be. But that is the reality of the world that we're living in. And so maybe tech notes are, or something, something we need to look at. But I would just personally feel better to ask the voters if we're going to raise their taxes, for them to say yes to us, rather than just to go out and do it arbitrarily. And I have known some districts that have done it and it worked out okay for them. I've also known some districts in other states that did that and turned over the entire board and the administrative staff. So, you know, you have to kind of balance whether you would want to do something like that without the voters approving it in our district.
And then there's another option, that's House Bill 130. It's more or less the same thing. You go out to the voters and request additional funding for technology. But the benefit to House Bill 130 is that you're not limited on a note rather than a bond. And so the difference is you have a 5-year note versus a 20-year bond. So typically, if you're buying computers, your computers are not going to, even though they may work, this works, but it's less secure because it's old. So you have to replace it every 4 years or 5 years. And that's one of the problems that we're facing, is the replacement cycle of these devices. The devices, for the most part, work fine, but they're not secure.
Mike, would you briefly explain to the board just sort of the tech note versus and the other, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a long time since I looked at it, that counts against your bonded indebtedness, doesn't it?
Both do.
Both do?
Yeah.
So that's something, it's just a different way.
Yeah, but I think we're currently under what, I mean, we
Yeah,
didn't bond out at capacity, we were under what our.
Yeah, I mean.
We've never been this low in the history of the school district in terms of.
Yeah, a few years ago, I think we were supposed to 96%, and then it fell down to 88%, and now it's dramatically decreased. So our bonding capacity is really is in really good shape. The problem is like they talked about, 440 million is tied to Intel, and so we do have to be careful to bond. To get back up to that 96, especially because of Intel. But we have there's for what we're talking about today, we do have capacity.
There's one other thing that's real important too, and if it's changed, then let me know. But I know over many years, when we looked at PSFA and the capital, which one of the first things they would look at is how are you bonded to capacity, or what percentage are you bonded to? And if you're really low, then their response is use your own money first and then come back and ask us for money later. So it's another reason to keep it fairly consistent over time. There are times we have been bonded 100% to capacity in years past. You imagine that. But that's when we were building a school year, and it's a very different environment than we have today. But you don't want to let it get too low, because if you do, they look very unfavorably on adding additional resources to the district. They don't look at that as a positive. Go ahead.
Just one more question is the parking. Have you counted how many cars currently parked in the parking lot
So
compared to what?
We have about 60 spaces. About 60.
So we're maxing it, but it looks good because we have the overflow.
Right. The important part about this is it's also ran by zoning. So based on a commercial building, which is what this would fall into, there's a certain number of parking that you would need for the occupancy of this building. Not necessarily the enrollment, but the occupancy. So that's what's driving these parking numbers.
But we can't drive it by just asking how many park now and see if we're up.
I will tell you we're always short parking, and that's why
And this will
It's on
definitely
a
be
first come, first
It'll be
served.
up.
Yeah, it will definitely be a lot more than what they have now. Exactly.
That was, that's the way I should ask the
There's a
question.
mark for all that.
We occasionally have a few that jump over and park in our lot too, but that's okay.
Well,
Well, when you see the 118, I mean, it's a dirt lot, but that makes it much, much more, you know. Gary, any other thoughts that you want to add to it or questions? I don't know where we're not. It's kind of awkward because we're not voting, but we're giving direction, but it's still something with that. I really, I mean, honestly, I would love option C. I love option C. At the same time, I'm looking more at option B just because it's a little more conservative, but at least it's different. What I don't want is us to build a building, and no matter what we do, it's gonna be better than what you currently have, honestly. Like, it has walls, right?
I don't ask for much.
Yeah, and so that's good. And at the same time, like, this is a project we've worked on for a long time, and we do want it to be something that can last for a while and that has some good things. As I hear, because I was all just, option B will be fine. As I hear what you talk about with the oxygen, I see some of the good things. Because our goal for those students as they come in is for them to be able to move into the world, right, and have jobs and all those things. And so I still see the good for that. But when I think about everything we have to cut for 40 million, that I feel very concerned about with the district. No matter what we do, we're gonna have to cut. And so with the board, where is everyone kind of feeling as you look at the options? And I understand exactly what Gary's saying. I think we don't want this extravagant school that's where kids want to be. We want them to be in those other schools if they can be.
If I may, let me add this. So let's just say that the direction is A. One of the things that, that we would do is bid out A with alternatives. And so sometimes the bidding comes out favorable and say, oh, okay, we didn't expect it to come out this favorable. We can get alternative A, alternative B. So, we could do A with B as an alternate. And if the pricing comes in favorably, maybe we could get B. I know that's very optimistic.
Yeah, one of the nice parts too about this process is, if you recall, we were doing a CMAR, which is what we did for the CTE building as well, is as we're going through the design, we're budget's always at the forefront. And so we're constantly making decisions and value engineering as we move through there to try and get to our target. So to that point, we can have that as well, if everything's favorable, we can have this empty space, which is an option B. But it's an alternate so that when those final bids come in after we've completely designed, value engineered, and then we're getting true pricing, we can see at that point, okay, well, it didn't come in favorable, but it's designed in such a way, we could potentially add on later, or it did come in favorable, and it is something that we can accommodate. And that's something, the nice part again about the CMAR is that we're not just waiting to the end to figure it out. We have a pretty good understanding throughout the design of what the possibilities are. And again, having the design kind of in our back pocket helps in the future too. We're not having to start from scratch, but we've stepped out for utilities, electrical, all of those things that would, otherwise maybe a bigger cost down the road.
So thoughts from.
So what is the timing for going out to bidding? Are you talking about?
So we just awarded a contractor, it was a month ago now. And so right now we're kind of on hold through schematic. We've started schematic design, but we're kind of sort of soft pedaling it because of some of the things that have come up around this, and that's kind of the urgency around us. We want to just make sure we're going down the right direction, and then as we go through each phase of the design, we'll get real-time estimates from our contractor, who will be closely working with the design team to find ways to value engineer and really get the best value from the construction. So that'll happen over the next year. We'll have multiple phases of design, which will, the result of that will be estimates throughout the way, which kind of really help us understand. So for instance, CTE, we had a pretty good understanding of what the final cost was going to be. By the time we got it, things were slightly tweaked based on the final design, but really, ballpark, we knew what we were going to come in instead of the traditional design bid build, you design it and then you bid it out, and you're kind of just hoping for the best.
I guess I was thinking also, Mike was here, thought about the legislative session and school districts coming together. That's a 60-day session, and so that money wouldn't be available until like next July, perhaps, if that happens. Is that correct? So I was just thinking about the timing, if that happened to be a positive thing for the districts. I don't know how much we would get, but that would maybe impact the planning or your ability to do the other projects, put some of that money toward the school. So to me, it's kind of a timing thing with all of this, no matter how you do it. So, yeah. Okay. I mean, I like that suggestion.
I mean, the timing could, yeah, the timing could work out, not necessarily for this project up front, other than if we plan to phase, then that additional financing, if it does come from the state, would work out well for this project as well. Not perfectly, but it would work out well.
So, Dr. Bloom, do you want to give any recommendation?
Well, I think we've already covered most of those. You know, the board knows what the options are. I'm kind of like you. I think that A is what we can afford right now, and pretty much stay within the budget. But what I would like is if we could have ad alternates as part of this, and if we couldn't, I guess the thing I'm a little different is I would love to see a stub out for the future, so that if in the future they could have a gym where they could have an auditorium, we already have the infrastructure, and then we could go back in the next future bond, and maybe this one, maybe one on down the road, and get them those other two pieces. One of the things I don't understand, maybe you all can explain to me, is the plan A and B is very different. You know, and so I don't know how you would go in. Can you explain to me how you would do an ad alternate for B? Because the assembly's right in the middle of it.
Well,
and that's the extra piece there. For example, with C, I understand how you could do it. You take the auditorium off, and you take the gym off, and they're on the periphery of the building, and they could later be added on. I guess there's several things I like in C that are just the design of how it's laid out, apart from the auditorium and the auxiliary gym. And so I don't know what it would cost if we pull those two things out. Are we at 32? Are we, as Mike said, every time you make a change, you may mess up something else, you know, and it may increase costs. But you know, it's my personal, I would like to see the core of that and an opportunity in the future to add the auxiliary gym and the auditorium and build the core. And I don't know what how that would cost. My gut tells me it's probably closer to 34.
Well, every time it moves the way.
yeah, I think it's important again to note that because this is diagrammatic, the nice part is we're not set in stone as far as a floor plan. So this really isn't a design. It's really just about layout. You know, it's about where things might be. I mean, we could easily, and we talked to Dr. Cooper about this previously, about you flip the assembly space in the cafeteria so that the assembly could be that something that's added on that's may not be there right away. There's a lot of considerations around that. It's important to note also when you add the adults, let's say we were to go for option C as we want to design it, there would be some cost implications also on the design team, right? Because they're no longer designing for a building that was to the size that they were intended to. So again, it's that domino effect. So we would incur a little cost with the increased design scope, but overall we could design it in such a way that if we know here's the three things that we want as adults, let's design it so that in the event they come in too high, we are ready to kind of put them aside and the building can still function as it needs to without them. That's always an option. So that's the nice part about where we're at is we're not in a design yet. And so we can move some of these things around to accommodate phasing.
I guess my last comment with that is, as we look at this, I know absolutely we don't have the money for the gym. We don't have money for the auditorium at this point in time, unless we find some additional resources. So And even B, it's gonna be challenging to find an extra 2 million. So I'm probably not saying it very well, but I kind of like the fourth C, pulling out those two big expensive items for a lot of reasons. And if that came close to A's cost, then I would have preferred that design so that we could add those things on later. I don't see the potential to add those on with A. Does that make sense?
Yep, 100%.
Okay.
That's kind of where I was leaning towards too, is saying I like go for C, and then if we have to, like, I say, go after the state for the funding. See how it goes. And then I think you're right, and that layout, and again, I know we're not married to that, but the ability to take off the office gym and the auditorium, I think are easy with that kind of layout. Because part of me feels like we shouldn't just make a decision based off just now, but 5-10 years down the road, it's also gonna be more expensive to build those things now, right? So do we find a way to do it now with our current body and have other projects where we can maybe get state funding to cover those, or do another bonding option to cover those? My concern with that, because I'm leaning towards saying, yeah, let's find a way to see. My concern with that is that what if the state came back and said, we're not gonna change and you can't have an alternative school anymore, and then you invested money into an alternative school that doesn't really need to be a school because now we're changing it to a program.
And board meeting, so that's a possibility, it really is, if we can get that changed. That being said, though, we could still run a pretty good program as a program. It just would be minus the name, minus the mascot,
It would go back to
minus
the
the special graduation would be
It
gone.
would function mostly the same, right?
Sure.
And I mean, so there still would be the benefits of having those spaces there. So, I mean, that's why I'm leaning towards saying, like, let's try to find a way to make speed work, and then we can cut things like the gym and the auditorium, if we're not able to come up with the state, we're not able to hit the state, which I know that's kind of probably a long shot, right, for the state to give us that much money, but
Like Patrick's.
you never know.
I wanted to make a quick note just about option C. So option C, we gotta keep in mind that we're basically getting rid of the assembly space. That's an option B, because it's being replaced by both the auditorium and the auxiliary gym. So if for some reason those weren't coming in, we'd be back to option A essentially. With those, being kind of like phased.
And the assembly room is nice because then they could use that for lunch space too, which is nice. Kind of where it's at.
And so
Yeah,
I
or
think,
maybe
like,
you go with option B with the ability, I don't know, to add, and you can still add the, an auditorium and a gym there, to me that,
yeah.
to me, I think we should try to get everything, because again, it's not gonna be cheaper in the future, but they'll design it in a way where if we need to have them sub out for those additional spaces and be able to build them later, that we have that ability to do it.
There are, and looking at it, I would encourage the board to look at it carefully. A and C do have some differences in the way they're laid out. They're minor, but there are some differences. For example, like in the corner, I like that. I like the way that group and admin is really efficiently put together. I think is better than the way we have it over here. It's in A. That might not be any cost difference at all. But I just like the way that's laid out there. And there's a couple of other things. But you look at the classrooms in here and versus what we have over here. So I think the square footage of being is almost the same. There are some differences, and as you said, we can still make those adjustments. And I don't think there would be any cost. I just think this is more serviceable for students and staff though. But yeah. The other, I know the really important point is we couldn't take these kids back to the comprehensive, so we have no room. That's another thing we don't think about. We don't have one classroom left, not one classroom. And I think Rio Rancho's bigger because at one time we had 3,200 students in that building. And so they've got a little bit, they've got more room. for that. But as we've said, Rio Rancho High needs major work done now that it's 30 years old. So, we're gonna need money to do that. And it's, but we can't take any more kids back to Cleveland. There's no place to put them. There's no room. So
So
we
next
just
you
gotta
gotta find
keep
money
working
for
to get
another
this
high school and
changed.
So I don't know if that's clear, and I don't know if Gary and Beth are even agreeing with some of those things. But I think we could even look at the option B with the addition as as we go in and ask for the oxygen, so.
What I see, and this is just my own personal thought, is option C gets close to what we've offered every kid in Rio Rancho, New Mexico for the last 25 years. It gets close to that. I think if they had like an outdoor walking track for the community use in the evening, we pride ourselves on our kids to building something really nice, whether it's Cielo Azul, Joe Harris, Cleveland High School. We built Class A looking facilities for our kids. So that's why I say I think some form of C comes close to that, even though I know we don't have the money. But we've built those beautiful schools for our kids, and these are our kids. So I know it's a ton of money more, but I think option C with an auditorium, with a cafeteria, with a little bit of space to enjoy your life as a student is what we've given kids. So I like C. I'd be for B with the alternative options, but I think we just need to make sure we're talking about these are our kids. And I know we're talking money, but we always talk Rio Rancho kids first. Yeah.
So I guess when it comes to that, you gave us these options, okay? You gave us these options to look at. But if we try to go for that, we're looking at cutting significant amount. But I do think
here's the thing, we have the $80 million in bond.
Yeah.
But yes, we're gonna have to cut a lot of the other things that we said we're gonna be able to do with it. And that's not ideal, but if the state does have money, they should be allocating for.
Well, so that's where it puts it back, I think, on all of us, everyone here, we need to all go start talking with legislatures right now, because January is too late when we're in session, and so we really have to start moving on it right now.
We need to make sure we go a little bit more to our capacity and things that, where are we in our reserves? We're gonna get hit when we go to Santa Fe about how wealthy we are over here.
Well, they
So
think
we have
that
to have
we
a
barely
strategy.
balanced our budget.
We
for this year,
barely
so
balanced.
they can say we're wealthy, but.
I'm just saying what we're gonna hear over there. There's gotta be a strategy plan, so we're on the same page.
Well, and
Because
so-
I don't mind going to fight.
So on that, I know we used to do breakfast and such, and we usually just invite people, but are there other people we can invite, and would they even come, that we could really start moving on it to look into it? And Mike and Patrick, do you even think that this is realistic, that we can do this?
We can do whatever you want. The problem is what are the projects that we're not going to do? So like you say, oh yeah, C is wonderful. I'd love to do C. But so now we're looking at the difference between 26 million and 40 million. Okay, and the difference is all these projects that we're gonna have to cut. And the difficulty we have is.
To be fair, we're looking at 32 million to 80 million. We had allocated originally 26 million, but even option A right now is
Yeah.
at 26. So we gotta take 6 million off the table and make it go a little bit.
I know.
Right? We're already 6 million over.
Yes.
So
And remember, there's one other, I'm so sorry.
No, so yes, we're already 6 million in the hole because of the additional cost just for A, which I understand. But between option A and option C, it's not a 26 to a 40 million. it's 32 to 100. So it's an 8 million difference between the two options.
The problem, and yes, that's correct. Problem is that's 8 million that you have to cut. And when we're talking about replacing roofs, those are projects that they're not, it's, you know, it's not like building a park. You know, I don't want to, and I don't want to downgrade parks. Parks are beautiful. I love parks, but
If you don't do it, it costs you more money.
Well, and I think it goes back to kind of even what Gary had touched on, is, you know, we've prided ourselves on providing this level of facility to our students, and we also don't want to, you know, we want to make sure that it's a balance of making sure that our current facilities are being maintained to that same standard of a new facility. And so it is a little, you know, it seems like 2 million, but that's 2 million that, you know, that we're not having leaks, which, you know, you can see throughout the classrooms with the ceiling tiles and, you know, new light fixtures and things like that. So it is, you know, I feel like it's a balance.
Well, that's why I think though, if we go for C and we take off saying that, you know, that the auditorium and the gymnasium can be phased in, that'll get us down closer probably to 34 than 40.
Okay, question back to you guys, that auditorium, the way that I know that this isn't it, like, for sure, but the way we kind of have it positioned on there, is that actually useful to the school where it's at, or you really want it attached to that cafeteria?
I think the purpose of attaching it, correct me if I'm wrong, is because you wanted to utilize the cafeteria and so we could double the size. So I think
That was the assembly space. The auditorium itself, you know.
I just want to make sure we're not building something we don't necessarily.
Well, and I think that that's something we can explore during, you know, as we get into schematic design. I think at a kind of zooming out a little bit, you know, going to the $40 million option C, which is 37,000 square feet, we're also going to be designing a site that can accommodate that. So even if we don't do that, we still have to build the site to be able to accommodate that. So there's going to be some additional incurred costs just by increasing
Dirt work project.
dirt work. It's, you know, potentially retaining walls, and just the overall circulation has to grow with that. So we would still have to design that way it could accommodate a building, even if it's in the future. Again, I'm sure something we could work, but that's just something to keep in mind that I think what we're looking for is that that's the direction, you know, we go back to our design team, okay, we're designing a $40 million, you know, or our project budget is $40 million, but we're going to look at these things. They're going to be keeping that $40 million in their mind to say, okay, well, here's all the things that are going to be, that we need to accommodate this building. And so we'll have to do some of those things. And then it's really just about those specific square footages, like the oxygen auditorium that we would then, you know, potentially cut, but we would still be designing that building. So it may not come down as much. It's again, it's kind of like, just as much as it exponentially grows when we add, if you cut, you know, there are some things that's not a clean cut.
I mean, I'm kind of looking, going back to the option B, which gives the assembly with that, so it kind of opens that space up, which I think is a nice way to do it, so they can have larger lunches, they can have things in there. And then on this planned site, so you have a future building. So say we went, I think Fields pretty much has everything that C does, it's very close. But then you have that future building site, so maybe that's our future building site that we work on for the auditorium. Or not the auditorium, the oxygen.
We can approach it also so that we're not designing the 40 million or option C, and we're designing B with the intent that there are certain decisions that are made to easily do some modifications, even if they're site modifications to accommodate. You know, very similar to Shining Star. Shining Star was not designed to directly accommodate the additional pod. There would have to be some site work, some parking lot work, but the necessary utility items are in place, and the building is designed in such a way that you can add that without having to reconfigure the building. There just be some additional site work. So if we can think of it that way as well, so that we're not really building a site that's too large, because again, that's more for us to maintain. That, you know, is it an open lot? Like, what does that look like as far as maintenance? But again, the idea that in the future, if we did have the funding and we felt that there was a necessity to have the oxygen or the auditorium, it's just a matter of some some smaller upgrades to the site, but everything's ready to accept your building.
I wanted to just ask something really quickly, and so that I know my own mind. We talk about auditorium, are we talking about an auditorium like performing arts kind of thing? Or are we really talking more like a lecture hall at Cleveland High School? And so I think it's real important that everybody have in their mind what that really looks like. If it's not an auditorium, wouldn't it be more like a lecture
So
hall?
it would be more like a lecture. That's what I exactly. what I
Yeah, and in
said.
fact, the square
So
footage
it
that
could
we
be a
use for
classroom
that
space,
was-
and instruction could go on in there. One of the things, and it just kind of hit me out of the blue sky, so maybe it's not at this point even. But you talked about in that area, having people in from the community, and certainly, we look at some of our cafeterias in the district. Either of those spaces it would seem very advantageous to be able to have access from outside without going through the whole building. And so if you had like a lecture hall kind of thing there, it would be easy to use that for community events if you had a door in and out of that. And I think it looks like we could do that. But that's just another thought. That's why I asked earlier, Patrick, if we could get a price on what this would all look like, this design, without the auditorium, without the auxiliary gym, but having the stubbing for it. Because you're right, that isn't free, and it adds cost to the building. And that's why I was wondering if it's 30 for A, I'm sorry, 32 for A, would it be 33 if you put in that extra, the stubbing for future construction and all of that?
I think the stubbing would be pretty nominal. I think
Okay.
if it's planned ahead, I don't think that's
That
gonna
would have
sway.
much
I don't
else.
think that's gonna sway. I think it's more about how we look to the future as far as what are the implications for the size of the building. How's that gonna change the overall site, the circulation, and what are we planning for ahead of time versus what are we planning for potentially down the road.
So,
So I think maybe it's more about which direction do we want to go, and then as we start designing, we can really start to get into some of those nuances of how that might work. I think what we're looking for is really just that direction. Do we want to kind of go bigger, or do we want to tailor it back?
I think everyone's going thinking C, and then.
And we want it for the 26 million, but.
You're telling
This is what we want.
So therefore,
With taking some of those options out of it. So when you go to bid, I guess, as you're looking at it, I would say, we're looking for bigger, but we know that something's not, what might not work. So when they price it with and without the auditorium, with and without that option. Does that make sense? Or, and just for step out
Can I ask-
facilities.
Can I ask-
I think you said earlier that's close to A,
Yeah,
but I'm not sure it is exactly.
Well,
Because I know there are some
well,
major design.
Well, there's some, and they've moved things around based on those two larger programmatic elements. They've moved things around to make it flow a little bit more. So yeah, there would have to be some thought put into some of these spaces and how that might work. But when I say that, really it's more about what are we offering? And so in each of these A, B, and C, we're pretty much offering, as far as the classrooms are concerned, the same thing. The cafeteria is the same, the kitchen, restrooms will grow the bigger we get. But then really it's the auditorium and the oxygen. I think the concern it comes back to, it really is a jump from A to C because that assembly space is kind of that midpoint. And if we don't do the auxiliary gym or the auditorium, we lose the assembly space as well.
I just wanted to clarify, when you say put off the oxygen, that would not include the weight room, right? That is already included in
That's
A.
already,
Okay, because I
yeah,
don't
the
want
weight
to lose
room, was one of the very.
I mean, that's the hard thing as far as looking at this, is it, when you add those things, I don't know what that's gonna do to like the trusses and stuff like that, and that's usually what becomes really expensive as far, and so if we don't just put something on, I don't know if that creates a whole, you know what I mean, a whole nother.
Yeah, we're making it sound really easy, right, to elevate that stuff.
Is the oxygen standalone, meaning?
It could either stand alone or adjacent to.
So
It would be its own.
one thing to keep in mind is there is space on the site for future buildings the site originally. So, you know, there's option for them to be standalone, maybe not ideal, but that is an option. Talking about community use, having it separate could be beneficial.
But I think like when we look at our current schools and we're trying to stay up with security and things of that nature, that's not conducive to what the direction we're trying to go. So then we're gonna spend money to close things in later on, and so it's like, just,
That's right, yeah.
yeah. That's what we're doing. Rancho.
Trying to lessen the
I would envision it similar to what we did at Shining Star Preschool, so. It may be at two different ends of the building itself.
Mhm.
And so, like Shining Star, like Patrick was talking about, you have these different wings that, and so the future plan is to sub out a whole wing. And so the utilities are there, and then you just have to, and the space is there, physically the space is there to add on to that building. But almost that wing, it's just, it's a wing. So it's essentially a standalone building that would be attached, then it would open up to, you know, to accept the, you know, the folks going in and out of that. I mean, I would vision this more or less the same way, is that the space would be set aside to accommodate those two large spaces.
Yeah, from the interior of the building, not
Yeah.
necessarily standalone. It might, like, again, it might be off the building slightly. And again, I want to go back. This is diagrammatic. It's not going to be a rectangle for all intents and purposes. The idea is once we get into design, you start getting that pushing and pulling of some of that. But the general idea is there. And if we are planning for some of these larger, you know, the way that works might lend itself to have, okay, maybe the building slightly pushes in and out in this area that could then accommodate, you know, a hallway to a gym or a hallway to an auditorium, but we don't have that, then it's just a hallway to either an exit or, you know, something like that, which again, Shining Star right now, where that would go is just an exit, but that could also be a door or an opening to a new hallway for the addition.
To Jessica's point, also, you know, remember, maybe that hallway makes it more secure. May not, you know, when it's totally standalone, gotta have a different level of security needed for it. So that's something in this day and time we've got to think about is the security, and when we keep it all under one roof, maybe easier. I don't know, I just wanted to throw that out because I thought you made a really good point about considering safety and security as part of this.
So can I recap so I
Yes.
make sure I understand all this? So the configuration essentially, it would be option A with alternative 1 and 2. And so option A would have alternative 1 with number 1, which would be the auditorium, and then alternative 2 would be the gym.
I think we like the flow of kind of how, I mean, and I get that it's not a work one, but I think that everybody liked things on option B better. So kind of having that more as a starting point. So we would lose from option A.
So essentially C, so
So I guess,
C.
in some ways it's semantics, right? Because it is programmatically, it is A with adding an auditorium and the office room later.
I like the layout
So
of
either way,
C
but
better.
like the, yeah. We like the way that this one figure better, but again, we know it's not a actual one.
Yeah.
I think we're saying the same thing.
And then just again, to keep in mind that option C with adults does not include assembly. So it really is a jump from A to C, depending on what the funding goes. There's no,
So we wouldn't have that initial gathering.
But it has the lecture hall.
So that's.
well, it'll have the cafeteria. You'll always have the cafeteria. But option B adds assembly space that utilizes the cafeteria to open up to a larger space. But if we jump to option C, you either have the office gym and the lecture hall, or either or as assembly space. But if we can't build those, we're back to option A without any kind of assembly space beside.
So that's the biggest question, is this actually better just because it has that assembly space that's attached to the cafeteria? to give you a bigger space, because even with that auditorium, it's two nice big spaces, but they're not gonna be attached.
Sure. You know, we can make any of these work, I think, given where we're at. I think we're looking way down the line if we were to add these on, right? So in the meantime.
If the price is out good, I mean, maybe we just fight for it and see what we can get.
I think it's kind of one of those things that we're not, to Gary's point, we're not trying to over design too. So I think the idea with option C is we don't want to do an assembly space and an auditorium and an oxygen, because then it's kind of, it's a little overkill. The idea with these is, well, now they can act as those spaces. They can have that dual function. So my concern is that if we're going for this, then, now we're back to A without any assembly space. And if it, let's say it does come in, astronomical, we're not able to make this work, there is no assembly space at all for this. So, that's just kind of one concern.
I know, that's why I'm like, maybe we go for B and add on the gym, just because it gives you that extra space through here. And then you have that gym space, so say we can get that on, or the board that decides like, no, we're just gonna go for it regardless of whatever, somehow we're gonna make it happen. But you still have this nice space over here.
The assembly space could act as, we're showing 2,000 square feet, but it could act with maybe room risers, or something that makes it a little more multi-purpose, so that it can function as multiple things. It can be closed up, and then again, maybe it's on the outside of the building, so it's not having this community aspect, or people coming from outdoors to utilize it. It can be closed off from the school, but then also can be opened up to use as a cafeteria. So it's kind of more of that dual function idea, rather than just saying it's for one function only. I think we can look at that as well. And then the gym is really just the only thing that is the afterthought. When I say afterthought, it's designed to be able to, add on a gym, but that's kind of down the road.
Yeah, well, and when we price it, I think we should have that option to just go for it, and the board can kind of and we can sit down and maybe look at that one more time as it gets priced out, but definitely price it without it, so we can.
So then, that would save money potentially overall if we went with option B and then didn't do an auditorium, right? Because again, to have that be done. So you could do option B with the ability to add the oxygen later.
I really want to stress, again, I wish we never labeled it as an auditorium, because that's not what it is.
Right.
What it is the lecture hall at Cleveland. And we have something similar over at Rancho. So it's not. And for me, the difference is that space is appropriate for classroom. It would, if you wanted a large group classroom, 60 kids in a classroom or something or whatever, it's a classroom space. And so I wish we had not put that title on it, because I think that's really misleading.
Yeah. Well, and
it's like the lecture hall. But it goes back to your question, which is a good one. Would you rather have a lecture hall like that, even if it's attached over? Or would you rather have a larger, bigger space, kind of like elementary schools have, where they have their gym and their cafeteria together? Those are very functional spaces, right? They work really well. Would you rather have this kind of a space, or do you prefer to have that? And it is an auditorium, it's more of a lecture hall, but knowing this space will work for classrooms. The other is, we've overcome it in every single school to some degree, but this is never going to be a classroom space. Well, it can't be. You can't hear.
Yeah.
You can't. The acoustics aren't good. It's not. But it would allow more kids to eat together at lunch and be together. So that's I think a real positive. There's more time. The cafeteria is small, no matter how we look at it. So I really, we kind of want you all to which is the better for you? Is the larger space more like, and we've got a lot of those across the district, where we have the elementary cafeteria and kind of a mini area. Those work really well, and you could put a divider there if you wanted, or to have another classroom space, which would be like the lecture hall. Good acoustics, good for speakers, good for that kind of thing, but maybe not used all the time.
Well, that's why I guess I probably lean still towards option C, because to your point, Dr. Cleveland, and I don't know, maybe other people might have different experiences, but I think at Cuesta, they said, that doesn't work well for them in the cafeteria. Same thing, you're limited to the hours you can do it, it's attached to the cafeteria, you can't utilize that space during those times. The acoustics aren't as good. So while it seems judicious to have kind of more of a dual purpose space, that it actually gets not utilized as much because it's not as conducive to the type of activities you want to hold there.
So to your point, and to answer your question, I much prefer a lecture hall because of the very reasons that you said, especially going to 2 lunches. We're setting up and the takedown, and as great as our custodian is, it takes what it takes to get, we would lose a good 2 to 3 hours of the day where we could not occupy that.
So we have breakfast as well.
Right.
That's, I think that clean up.
And that was my biggest concern in attaching an extended space. So I would much prefer a lecture hall. I think my only concern would be if that was just an add-on, then we have nothing. We have no gathered space.
So you want, that you have now,
Okay.
will be less, and knowing, you would have to wait a little bit longer for something you might want.
So probably
That's
staying
hard.
with the option to not have the oxygen. And the money is gonna come from the sky.
No, it's gonna come from a future bond issue, or we're gonna have to go back out and do a special election to increase our, because we've already got the capacity.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to run another election. Beth is in here, she'd kill me. I said we won't run another election.
But I mean, I think in some ways it's our duty to do what we have to do to make sure we have to do it.
I just don't, and I don't want to just build something that's not, that we're just like, dang, we just put millions of dollars in, we should have gone a little bit higher, and done something that we really are happy that we have.
One last comment I'd like to throw out there, so again, we're looking along with. And Mike's talked about, we've cut more things, I want to cut more things. As the other things too, we make commitments on those bonds as well. We're already tightening up on what we're doing, and if we don't deliver what we say we will, then it's hard for people to want to vote for us again in the future. So from my perspective, that's all it is. I would rather take it from a future bond or take it from a special election. I'm not in favor of cutting more roofs and more other, than what we've already cut. So you could do that, I agree. I mean, we could go in and slash more projects. Personally, I don't think that's a good idea.
I agree, but at the same time, we also put in the bonds that we were gonna build in the new independent high school, and so that's also keeping our word there as well. So, so that's where I think it's, where as much as you hate to, it can almost be required for us to go after the voters, unless the state comes through and
The
actually
coalition
provides.
doesn't work.
Yeah,
I would push that with legislators really hard.
I
Thank you.
have a feeling it's gonna be a pretty strong coalition.
and I think
The
we'll,
problem this time.
well,
This is
and I think
what-
we'll get, I think there's a good chance to get some funding, how much is it gonna be?
Well, they can fix it though too. If all the districts, or many of them are saying the same thing, then to me, they ought to think about doing that. They could phase that as well over the next couple of years.
That's exactly what they were doing.
But that's
Because not
okay. We know
everybody
it's
needs
coming.
the
That's
money up
okay.
front.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know how to plan.
So, okay, so again, I want to make sure I got this right. We're planning for C with alternative number 1, and not necessarily in this order, lecture hall, and then alternative number 2, auxiliary gym.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Like they said, though, my concern is if we don't want to give them nothing at the same time without having the lecture.
There's no gathering,
There's no gathering space, yeah.
So really it's C with oxygen as alternative number 1.
The gym is number 1?
No, like we only have 2 options,
We're including.
like.
The only add-on is the gym, this would be base bid.
But option 1 with the better flow, it's a C.
No, we're
Well,
gonna-
no, yeah, no, so he's just saying, so taking the gym in or out.
The gym would
No,
be the
that's what I'm
only.
saying. They said option A, option A in terms of the funding and the whatever. But I think what I heard was we like the flow of C, the layout. It should not be any different, it's just a little differently organized.
Well, I thought we agreed that we should have an election,
Yeah,
and the option would be the gym.
Gotcha, so lecture hall,
Is based.
Plan C with
Space.
lecture hall with the alternative of the gym.
okay, any other questions?
So, that's fine. Yeah, I wish I had a cash register. Ching.
We thought you had one. I saw that thing in your office.
So, there's gonna be a lot more cutting, just for your information, quite a bit.
We're not gonna cut more, we're going to defer those costs, those ad alternates are gonna go be funded with a future bond or another additional election.
Well, it's only one ad alternate, so really, in,
It's probably closer to option B.
exactly, we're probably looking at about $34 to $35 million.
Yeah, so bond, so this plan right here is basically a $32 million plan. So the new, or what I'm understanding, is gonna be probably closer to a 35, 36, we're thinking.
Yeah, something in
So-
that range.
Yeah, so we're looking at rebalancing probably an additional $4 million from this.
And we're
I
hoping,
just don't see
and
it,
we're hoping,
Mike, I'm sorry, I don't. What I see on C, you all explain to me where I'm not seeing it right. Okay, I like the layout of C, I like this administrative complex over here. I think it's a better laid out complex, but I don't think it's more square feet. I think it's just organized differently. And if the cafeteria is the same size, the kitchen is the same size, the classrooms are the same size. And so if you don't do the auditorium,
but we're saying
and
we're
you
doing,
don't do,
but the board's saying they want to do the
you wanna do the other,
Yeah.
the lecture
other.
hall.
Yeah, the lecture hall.
Yes, that's why, that's the.
Okay, and you wanna do it at cutting the other projects? Or you
Well, we
wanna
want to
do
do
it,
that finding other funding.
okay.
Yeah.
So no cutting,
We want to be able to, we're hopeful we can get that extra 4 million from the state. If not, then doing
all
additional.
right, thank you, that helps me.
It's important to also remember that our bond was already cut a little bit even before this because of the updated PSFA match. You recall, a lot of our projects were based on that PSFA match, and because that number changed, we've actually, what we were able to leverage when we went out to bond is not what we're able to leverage now. So even currently with the $80 million, we're still about $20 million short of completing all of the projects roughly.
So what
Because of the
you're saying is that you're saying that we can't do the lecture hall without,
I think we just
and I think we're saying we're gonna try to find it some other way.
We're gonna try to, but that's yet to be determined, right?
I'd be real nervous about cutting more on the projects we have. So that's, but I'm also optimistic. One of the things, and again, it's not the technical, it's overall, we have a plan like this, and we finally have it all drawn out and what it really looks like. We have a lot better shot at going to Santa Fe and getting some additional money. Than saying we just need money for this. Here's the plan. This is what we can't build. We need you to help us finish it up. We have a much better shot at getting some help once we have the plan in place and can show people the plan and what we can't build. So, from just a, I don't know what you would call it, just from a salesmanship perspective, I think once we have the plan, we have a better shot at asking for additional money and finding it. Our other option, and it's not a good one, it's a bad one, but the other option, we go out again for an election earlier and get some additional money. Don't wait the 4 years because we've got capacity. We could do that now. And since our capacity's increased considerably, we could go out and ask the voters for the money to finish this and a couple of other projects as well. So that's another option. Bond issues are never easy. We spend a lot of time getting that all put together to do right. So there's risk with that, I think. But that would be a way to do both things without cutting existing projects. And if you want to throw tech notes or something else in there, or some, I mean, House Bill what, or,
One, two.
yeah, we could do that at the same time.
How do you feel?
Well, I just want to be clear.
I mean, here's the thing, like,
I feel fine.
just as much as I don't wanna cut any of
It's
the other
not-
things that we said we were gonna do in the bond, I also don't wanna build a mediocre new school when we said we're gonna build a new school with the bond money. So to me, my obligation to make sure that we build IHS in a meaningful way is just as strong as us adhering to the other projects that we outlined in the bond money. So to me, it's kind of almost no different. We committed to have that deliverable as well. And so why rebuild, basically, and I understand, like, yes, the functionality will be better either way, right? But it's also not judicious to say, okay, well, we're gonna just do this because as it is, we're having to cut, right? As it is, I mean, everything has increased significantly. That's not the fault of anybody here from where we were at in planning for going out to the bond election a year ago compared to where things are at now. So to me, then we have to inform the voters and the community what the realities of it is. So, while yes, it's not ideal, and you hate asking for more money, we have things that we have to complete, and, you know, like you said, roofs aren't really like optional projects, so.
So, again, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Option C, to include the lecture hall with alternate gym. Plan it, stub it out, get ready to do it, whether it be next year or whether one of the years we get the funding. At the same token, we will be exploring other revenue options to include potentially tech notes, House Bill 130, or just another mid-season, so to speak, general obligation bond. To get all these projects completed, or at least some of them.
And when you go to bid, I wanna see the price with it not just stubbed out too. So what it would be just as it is, and then also with it just stubbed out.
Yeah, typically what they'll do is they'll give us what's called base bid. So here's your base, what the stuff you have to have, and then if you add in the alternates or so much, it'll go up at each alternate.
Okay, we feel good, we're ready for dinner.
And with the legislative process, I mean, Dr. Cleveland is correct, you have to be organized in your approach. And legislators don't have time to read a lot, so the more visual you can be with them and show them, here's what we need for our students. And here is what we need to complete this project, I think you'll have a lot of support there, but it's a political process, so you have to kind of, the district has a good reputation there, but I think there are a variety of things you can do. And I'm hopeful that that'll happen. We've also increased the square footage quite a bit in Plan C, and we like this layout better, so I guess my question is, can you put it in this square footage, increase this square footage of A a bit to make it more functional,
So,
like C is for these.
so C, the only increase with C is the lecture hall and the ops gym. It's the same programmatic square footage,
All right.
but it's just configured a little different. But what I did hear is that we like the layout, or at least the configuration of option C. So that's something I've noted to say. The way it flows, kind of the adjacencies of that, we like option C. But the square footage remains the same. It's really those few programmatic elements that we're adding or taking.
This is so that's nice.
All right, yeah. Does everyone feel comfortable with where we're at?
As fair as possible.
Who's gonna bring,
Yeah.
we'll try to bring Jeff up to speed
Yeah.
when we get a chance.
All right. I'm good. Okay, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Probably gonna call.
See these here, right?